When two county deputies stepped out into the dusty ring of the Buffalo livestock auction, my stepson Derek thought they were there to escort me out. He waved his gold pen in the air, pointing at my mud-stained boots. "Get this old man off the rails, Sheriff!" Derek barked across the auction loudspeaker. "He's mentally unfit, and he's trespassing on my commercial sale." The sheriff didn't touch my shoulder. He walked right past me, pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt, and set them on the wooden rail right beside Derek's coffee cup. "The only trespasser in this arena is you, son," the sheriff said softly. 2 hours before that gavel fell, Derek believed he was walking away with $240,000 of my life. He didn't realize that in Wyoming, a city suit doesn't give you the right to sell another man's brand. To understand how we ended up in that dusty arena, you have to go back 3 months. I spent 42 years breeding black Angus cattle on 400 acres of wind-swept ridge in Sheridan, Wyoming. My skin feels like old saddle leather. My hands are thick, scarred by barbed wire, and stiffened by 72 winters of cold mountain air. My wife, Sarah, passed away 4 years ago from kidney failure. She left behind her 39-year-old son from a previous marriage, a man named Derek. Derek wears sharp felt hats, drives a pristine white pickup truck that has never hauled a single bale of hay, and works as a commercial lease broker in Denver. I raised Derek from the time he was 10 years old. I bought his first horse. I paid off his college tuition when he dropped out of business school, and I never once called him my stepson. He was just my boy. 3 months ago, during a late February blizzard, an old windbreak fence collapsed on the north pasture. I was out in the dark, pulling a stranded calf from a frozen snowbank, when a heavy wooden beam snapped under the weight of the ice. It crushed my left shoulder and broke 3 of my ribs. I lay in that snow for 2 hours before a neighbor found me and loaded me into his truck. I spent 12 days in the regional hospital in Billings, Montana, hooked up to oxygen and pain medication. While I was laying in that hospital bed, Derek saw his chance. He dug out an old power of attorney paper that Sarah had signed 8 years ago when she was sick. He brought a commercial transport fleet to my ranch in the dead of night. He rounded up my entire herd of 180 black Angus cattle. He locked the iron front gate of my ranch house with a heavy logging chain. When the hospital transport van brought me back to Sheridan on a cold March afternoon, my front driveway was blocked. Derek was standing on my front porch wearing a fresh tweed coat, holding a stack of legal papers. "The doctor said you can't survive another winter out here, Silas," Derek told me, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "I've leased the 400 acres to a clean energy investment group out of Colorado. They're putting up 12 wind turbines along the ridge. The cattle have been shipped to the county auction yard, and I've secured you a room at an assisted living home near Cheyenne." I stood on my crutches in the freezing mud of my own driveway. The cold wind came howling off the Bighorn Mountains, cutting right through my coat. I looked at the boy I had bought his first boots for. I didn't scream at him. I didn't wave my crutches in the air. "A man who sells his mother's memory for a quick check from Denver," I said softly, my breath clouding in the freezing air, "is going to find out that mountain grass is hard to digest when the snow gets deep." Derek didn't look me in the eye. He set a yellow envelope with $800 in cash on the hood of the transport van, turned around, and walked inside my house. I didn't take the van to Cheyenne. I told the driver to drop me off 3 miles down the county road at the foot of the North Ridge. On the back edge of my land sits an old 19th century stone shepherd's cabin. It has no electricity. It has an old cast iron wood stove, a hand-pump water well, and a tin roof that leaks when the snow melts. I spent $45 of my savings buying 2 boxes of paraffin candles, 5 sacks of dried beans, a box of rifle cartridges, and 2 cords of split dry pine from a neighbor. I dragged my swollen leg and broken ribs up that mountain trail, carrying my canvas sack on my good shoulder. For 3 weeks I lived in that stone cabin. I chopped pine wood with my right arm, one small swing at a time. I boiled snow for water when the pump froze over. I slept under 3 heavy buffalo robes on a narrow wooden bunk, listening to the coyotes howl along the ridgeline where my cattle used to graze. In the quiet dark of those mountain nights, my mind tried to break me down. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the hot suppers she used to cook on the kitchen stove down at the main house. I thought about how easy it would be to call Derek, accept the room in Cheyenne, sit in a warm hallway and let someone else worry about my meals. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my old steel brand registration card from 1982. It was worn thin at the edges, stamped with the red seal of the Wyoming Livestock Board. If you let a thief keep what he stole just because you're tired, you aren't choosing peace, you're choosing surrender. And a Wyoming rancher doesn't surrender his brand to anyone. "I am Silas Thorne," I whispered into the dark, cold cabin. "And as long as there is grass on this mountain, nobody burns my mark off my land." Derek made one fatal mistake. He was a city broker who thought cattle were like shares of stock, that whoever holds the land holds the herd. He didn't understand Western livestock law. He had listed my entire 180-head Angus herd at the annual Wyoming spring cattle auction in Buffalo. He expected to walk out of that barn with over $240,000 in cash. He didn't know that 3 days before the auction, I had walked down that mountain into town. I didn't call a real estate lawyer. I walked straight into the county sheriff's office and laid my 1982 brand registration card on the desk of Jim Miller, the chief state brand inspector for Johnson County. At 5 minutes before 10 on auction morning, Derek sat in the grandstand drinking his coffee, showing fake ownership papers to 3 wealthy buyers from Texas. That's when the side door of the arena opened, and I walked in with Inspector Miller and the deputies. State Inspector Miller stepped up to the main microphone, pulling a thick leather binder out from under his arm. "Under Wyoming Statute 1121, Jim's voice echoed through the metal rafters of the barn, "land ownership does not constitute legal title to livestock. Every animal in Lot 74 bears the Iron Sun brand on their left hip. That brand was registered to Silas Thorne in 1982, and the registration fee was paid in full by Silas 3 weeks ago." Jim looked up at Derek with cold, hard eyes. "Furthermore, under state law, attempting to transport or sell branded livestock without a signed state bill of sale from the registered brand holder is a felony offense." The 3 Texas buyers immediately stood up, closed their checkbooks, and stepped away from Derek as if he were carrying a contagious disease. Derek stumbled down the wooden steps of the grandstand, his face red with panic and rage. "Silas!" Derek shouted, his voice trembling across the arena. "The Colorado Energy Company paid $50,000 in advance lease deposits. I used that money to pay off my commercial real estate debts in Denver. If this deal falls through, they're filing criminal fraud charges against my broker firm by Friday." I stood in the center of the auction ring, leaning on my hickory stick, looking at my stepson. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel like striking him. I felt the quiet, steady truth of the mountain land beneath my boots. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a brass-bound pocket notebook, and laid it on the wooden auction rail. "Choices have boundaries, Derek," I said, my voice carrying clear through the silent arena. "When you build a fence on another man's land without checking the survey, you don't own the pasture. You just built a very expensive pen, and now you're the one trapped inside it." The state inspector stepped forward and placed a formal impoundment lien on Derek's white pickup truck and his Denver bank accounts to cover the cost of hauling and feeding the cattle. Derek stood there in the dust of the auction ring, his hands shaking, his expensive coat covered in cattle dust. He realized right then that the mountain didn't care about his Denver office or his clean energy contracts. He had traded away 30 years of family trust for a deposit check he couldn't keep. 2 weeks later, the snow began to melt along the lower ridges of Sheridan, exposing the rich green spring grass underneath. My grandniece Clara came up from Laramie to help me manage the ranch. Together, we drove my 180 head of black Angus back up the valley road, their hooves creating a slow, steady thunder against the damp earth. The iron gate at the front of the ranch was open again. The chain was gone. Clara and I sat on the wooden porch steps of the main house, drinking hot black coffee out of tin mugs, watching the cattle scatter across the north pasture. "Are you going to sell the wind energy leases, Uncle Silas?" Clara asked. I took a sip of my coffee, looking out at the snow-capped peaks of the Bighorn Mountains shining in the morning sun. "Wind comes and goes, Clara," I told her, my voice level and calm. "Companies come and go. Money comes and goes. But grass, good water, and honest work, those things stay as long as a man has the grit to hold on to them." Clara smiled, leaning her head against my arm. "I'll go check the south water trough," she said, standing up. "Take the blue truck, son," I told her. "I am 72 years old. My left shoulder aches when the cold front rolls in from Montana, and my ribs will never align quite straight again. I don't have a clean energy contract, and I don't have a white pickup truck. But when I walk out onto my porch tomorrow morning, every head of cattle on that hill will carry my mark. Every drop of water in that spring will belong to my land. I won't owe a single dollar to any bank in Denver, and I won't owe an explanation to any man alive. My name is Silas Thorne, and this is my ranch."